our speaker, Margaret Cumberland, is the Flora Field Ecologist 3. Okay. At the Appalachians and Cumberland Plateau domain, based out of East Tennessee, and has been with NEON for 10 years. I'm sure Margaret will tell us more about what NEON stands for. Her role involves leading a team of technicians to collect ecological data and ensures the accuracy and integrity of the flora-related data products. In addition, she is a NEON certified trainer, is the office's IT liaison and outreach liaison, and schedules all terrestrial observation activities. She has an MS in conservation ecology, and please join me in welcoming her.
So like Casey said, my name is Margaret. I've been a part of NEON for 10 years now, and I've been a full-time. So I've been there a while. I'm one of the ones. It was only created like a little bit longer than that, so I'm there more than half of its time of existence. So today I'm going to talk about mainly what NEON is. And I'm going to focus a lot on the resources because the point of NEON is to help you and anyone looking at any sort of ecological anything. We're doing our best to provide help. So I'll go over what kind of help we have, and hopefully that will help some of you. And then I'll talk a little bit about some data usage ideas and dive in a little bit that I've looked at, and then at the end, I'm hoping to go through the website just to get you started on where to look to see how we can help you in some way with your research or your career or your just general endeavors in the ecology field. So NEON, National Ecological Observatory Network, big mouthful, so we like to say NEON, but we are a continental scale 30-year project funded by the National Science Foundation, and we're operated by Battelle. So what we do is we enable the analysis of the free and open data and samples, and these data and samples are all directly comparable. And not only are they directly comparable within NEON, but we've done our best to make them interoperable with the National International Network of other standardized measurements. So for example, the way we measure trees is the same way the US Forest Service measures trees. And so we try to make our measurements as similar to the standard of those types of measurements in that field. That's NEON in a nutshell. This is where we are. So we're spread out all over the country. I actually met someone who was in the room where they drew the lines, but it's roughly ecodomains based on precipitation and temperature. And then they added in some geographical information as well to get it into 20 separate regions. Within these domains, we have anywhere from 2 to 3 or 1 per sites. The green ones are terrestrial and the blue ones are aquatic. And every green dot, we're doing the same thing, going out, collecting the same type of data. Same way with the blue, all the aquatics are doing the same type of thing. And we're all over. So specifically, I'm here. We have 5 sites, 3 terrestrial, 2 aquatic. One of ours is up in Virginia, but most are in East Tennessee. One's in Oak Ridge, National Lab. One's in the Smokies, and then one's up in the Southwest Virginia mountains. But we are all over, and we collaborate to make sure we're collecting the data the same way. So with these 81 field sites, we have over 180 data products, which I will not go through today, but I will touch on later. You can kind of split this data into 3 big categories. You have this automated instrumentation system, so that's sensors out in the field continuously streaming data. And so we have dedicated people out there making sure they work and they're clean and they're still making sense. Observational sampling is what I do. We have a team of technicians and we go out in the field and we collect data, all sorts. And then we also have, I think we have 2 planes, 2 or 3, and they collect, they're our airborne observation platform, they collect our remote data. So we have LiDAR, high-res spectroscopy, or high-res photography and infrared spectroscopy. Yeah, we have those 3. They're all co-located. And they fly over our sites. Minimum every 5 years, they do as many as they can every year. This is a rough idea of what an EM site looks like. We have our tower with all our instrumentation for meteorological stuff. Light, wind, solar, phenocams, and then spread out around it, we have our soil array that does below ground and surface measurements. And then we have a similar setup, but a little different in our aquatic sites. We have like one arm of this in a version right next to the water body, stream, lake, river. And then we have sensors in the water continuously streaming data. And a lot of these are matched. And then in between and all around, we have people on the ground measuring trees, collecting soil samples, measuring small mammals, lots of different things. And then we have our flyover. So these little inserts are kind of they're not any particular site. They're sort of just a general what it looks like. So we have our tower with plots around it within the air shed, and then we have plots spread out around to characterize the entire site. I could speak about this for hours because it's very complicated, but generally speaking, that's how it's set up. All right, so our 188 products can also be split in categories. A lot of times if I'm talking to one of you, I will say, what are you interested in? Because this will take forever to go through everything. Because we cover atmospheric, organismal, ecohydrology, biogeochemistry, and remote sensing. Within each of these, we have all of these. So I'm not going to read through them all. But hopefully some of these are standing out for some of you as that's what I want to learn more about. Here's another even simpler view, but if you see all the orange dots, those are all temperature sensors that we have above the canopy, in the canopy, below ground, next to our water sources, underground, and they're all the same type of sensor getting temperature data. And that's one of our continuously streaming ones, as well as PAR, which is photosynthetic active radiation, so light. And we do light at all the levels and CO2 at all the levels. And so with the CO2 in particular, you can actually use the data that's streamed from our soil array and then our soils data that's collected in the field and calculate soil respiration. And it's all directly comparable, even within a site. And then you can look at this site versus a site in Alaska, doing the same thing, see what's happening, or in Arizona. Okay, so that's very brief overview of the data that we have. How to access it is our data portal is probably our easiest way to sort of dive into specific data products that may have piqued your interest. I'm going to go through our data portal and kind of demo how to navigate the site a little bit at the end. But generally speaking, we have this explore data products area, and you can read a lot of information there and sort of filter in what you want. And once you get your data product number, the easiest way is to use, we have an API, we have code packages, and it's Python and R are the 2 main languages we use we have our own code packages in those to sort of look through our data in an easier way. And so a lot of the data is The data is not helpful if you can't access it. And so there's a lot of effort put into the data portal being easy to use, and we have tutorials on how to use it. And for many different angles, depending on what's the easiest for the scientific community. And people are using our data. This graph they update every year, and it just makes me justify my job and career. Because this is why I do what I do, is people using our data. So for NEON, it is a 30-year project. Year 1 was 2019. So we just finished year 5. You notice we have a lot of data ahead of time. We started building towers in 2014, and the last one came online in 2019. So this is all the construction phase. As soon as a tower was built and people were able to collect data there, they started. So some of our data sets go all the way back 10 years at this point, depending on what site it is. In 2019, our last 2 sites, Hawaii and Yellowstone, came online. And then I don't know if it was because NEON finished construction or because of COVID, but after 2020, the numbers went way up on people getting a chance to look at our data and actually use it. So if you look at this, the blue, the dark blue, I should say, is strictly people using data. The light blue is actually using our samples. So that means we have a biorepository full of samples waiting for someone to write a proposal to use them. So while we're out in the field, we collect a little extra and put it in an archive, and it gets sent to our biorepository, which is hosted by Arizona State University. And so this is anywhere from soil samples, extra ground up biogeochemistry samples from leaf litter or from roots. It's extra aquatic samples. We have a list here. All our beetles, we specifically look and ID the ground beetles, but for the crabids, but then all our bycatch gets sent to the biorepository. And I know that has been used by several researchers at this point. There's a lot you can do with bycatch. Our plant vouchers are also housed there, and then our ground beetles and our plant vouchers are all digitized. So if you go to the website, you can actually look at our samples. And then all the samples are also integrated with other databases. So GBIF, iDigibio, and the bold systems for barcodes are all integrated with NEON specimens as well. One of my favorite examples of how this works is in soils. We have a microbial sample that in the field, we put our sample in a vial straight on dry ice. And it stays in dry ice, gets transferred to our ultra low at -80, back on dry ice, gets sent to the biorepository, and they put it in their freezer. So at no point is this sample ever above like a -20-ish. Straight from the field into storage. And it's collected 3 times a year at all our sites, which for terrestrial sites, I think that's 47. And so you could say, I want 1 sample from each site collected in the spring. Actually doing that field work yourself is impossible because you can't be in that many places at the same time, but they're there, fresh-ish from the field, ready to be looked at, which is really neat. And so that's also a very big resource that is starting, if you see the chart, starting to be used more and more. So we have data and we have samples. Another really neat resource, especially, I emphasize this more for undergrads, but it might be useful for y'all as well, is our protocols, how we collect data. And so we've been collecting data now for about 10 years. I pulled this a few years ago. I think this one's about to be revised again, but every other year we would look through our protocols and try to make them better and better. And so the way that we collect the data has been vetted all over the country in many different environments for like hundreds of technicians saying, this is confusing, or this is a hard, and how do we do this the same way as everyone else? And it's all written up in our protocols. and they're all available for anyone to use as a baseline for your research. If you're just starting out and you're like, how do I collect small mammals? What do you use? So we have it laid out really well in charts and diagrams, then we have all the references we've used for that. And it's a great jumping off point for research. Also, if you want to increase your data set by integrating it with ours, you can collect data the same way we do in a place we don't collect, and that explodes your research to all of the neon data. So it can be used many different ways. It's just a good jumping off point for different areas of study. Another really neat resource that's also growing more and more every year is our Neon Research Support Services. We just changed the name last year. It used to be called Assignable Assets. This makes way more sense. But this is a chance for you to use the Neon infrastructure. So like I said, we're spread all over the country. We have towers, we have permits, we have people. If you can think of a way to utilize that, you can write a grant and work with us. We've done everything from just putting an extra sensor on the tower for people. And we had one where you put, I'm not going to be able to quote where this is from, but they put a trail cam on the tower to look at leaf angle. And all they did is they sit on the camera, we set it up. At the end of the study, we mailed it back. Very easy for us, and then they get data that they don't have to travel to collect. Another neat one, which we didn't get to do, was, hey, while you're out, could you just take pictures of mushrooms and send them to us? Florida got to do that, we didn't get to do that one. But one we did get to do is we have our small mammal Sherman traps. Someone sent us eye buttons, so for a whole year, we would put the eye button in the trap that had 2 temperature sensors, one in and out of the trap, so they could track capture rates that or like missed capture rates, basically, because the temperature would increase in the trap if there was a mouse in it, even if it didn't close. I don't know the results yet. They just finished the study this winter. So whatever your imagination could think of, there's with Neon infrastructure you can propose. It can be really simple, it can be complicated. This is a really neat area that's every year we've done more and more. I also do want to highlight, we have mobile deployment platforms, and that's basically a mini tower. I can't remember how many we have. I think we have around 5. But you can basically rent a mini tower and put it a place we don't have a tower. They did this in Kansas to monitor a burn that they did in the prairie. They put our mobile deployment MVP next to it to monitor all the atmospheric stuff. Okay. We have data, we have samples, we have protocol, we have infrastructure, and then everything else. So this slide kind of covers the end of it, where we have tutorials, we have teaching modules, we give data skill workshops. Have any of you been to the Association of Southeastern Biologists Conference that they have in the spring? We try to go there. Okay, I saw at least one hand. We try to go there, and we just started this last year, but we're going to try to give a data skills workshop there every other year. Last year was our first trial, and it went pretty well. We have science videos. So this is on our YouTube channel, and I have talked to professors who use our video on LiDAR as just an introduction to their class on LiDAR. So it's not just neon specific, it's just sort of ecological concepts as well. We have community code. We have a pretty active GitHub on not just the code that we've developed, but community code that they've developed to work with our data. And then we have seasonal fieldwork. So every year we hire seasonals to help us do all the work, all the observational sampling, because there's a lot to do. And we hire them for the season, and we hire a lot of fresh graduates. So not just undergrads, mainly undergrads, but sometimes grad students, just depends. And it's a really good way to get experience because we don't require you to have 3 years of work experience. We are the 3 years of work experience. So we get a lot of people who are trying to figure out what they're interested in. If you know people looking, I have a card on the side with this information on it. We are currently hiring for the season. My particular domain is full, but we have many domains. There are some that are harder to get people to live in than others. But it's a really good atmosphere for early career scientists. Okay, so that's our resources. Now I'm going to go through a few ways the data has been kind of used. It's ways we think the data can be used, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. So we have data that can be used for climate change. One of the big wonderful things about NEON is we are a 30-year project. So we're going to be there a while collecting this data, hopefully. And so we will have it we already have it for 10 years now, and you can already see changes, and we're supposed to have it for another 25 years. One of the places that it's going to be affected a lot is our Alaska sites. They monitor the ice breakup in our product sites, and that's going to be a very good data over time to see changes. We also a lot of our sites are connected with the long-term agroecological research sites. And that is land use and data management with ag activities. I know we have a lot that are in farmers' fields and they have working relationships with the farmers, either with crops or with cows. And so it's really interesting where they implement different management practices to see how that affects the ecology. So these are at our, this is in California, but this is our Puerto Rico site as well. And then we've been where we are long enough that there have been natural disasters. One example is Hurricane Michael. It came through and really knocked a bunch of trees down at our site in South Georgia, the Jones Center. That's actually where I did grad work, but way before this. So it's completely different now. And so we have data before and after this natural disaster. The only thing I've heard through the pipeline is the cotton rats exploded, and the population was crazy after the hurricane. But there's still, we're still collecting data, so you can see long-term changes after hurricane and before. And then the example that's much more close to heart is the Smokies wildfire. And so this actually came through our tower site. This is our site right after, like a month after the fire. And it burned a lot of things. But I'll talk about that on the next slide. For those of you who may not know, there's the Chimney Tops 2 fire that happened in mid-November 2016. Within the park, it burned over 100,000 acres. This is the burn area, and then all these dots are our neon plots. And so our tower is actually square in the middle of the burn. And we have a concentrated tower research plot area, and the whole thing was burned. And then we have a few scattered plots, and they were also in various burn intensities. The fire got hot enough to actually melt our aluminum stakes in some places. That's what that is. It melted aluminum tags off the trees. So it was very hot in certain places. And we were there 2 years before the fire. The first year, admittedly, is only half a year's worth of data, but we have one full set of data before the fire hit. And then we have 8 years of post-fire data at this point. So a couple of years ago, So one of the drawbacks of being in Neon is I'm so busy collecting the data, I don't get to analyze it because that's not my job, that's your job. But I did sit down because I was really curious, because I've been seeing fire effects in the field. And so that'll give you a little glimpse that hopefully will push you to do your own research and take it further. I didn't do any statistics. I just threw it on a graph. So this is herbaceous biomass, where we go out and have these clip strips and we clip anything that's annual growth for herbaceous plants. They're in various categories. And so just want to highlight the fire was here. And the woody stone plants, which is baby trees, really started getting high after the fire. Everything went down and they started going high, but then they stopped qualifying for this protocol in 2023, which meant we only measured woody stone plants if they were under a centimeter, 10 centimeters above the ground. Because that meant they qualified for our vegetation structure protocol. So here's data from that protocol, and in 2019, 2020, 2021, it started increasing really high sapling growth after the fire. And so this kind of demonstrates how we have our protocols kind of meshed, where one leaves off, another one kind of picks up. And this is, I'm biased towards the flora protocols, but it's particular for all our plant protocols. If you picture a forest, we try to characterize the entire biomass of the forest using various protocols. We have roots, we have canopy, we have litter, we have herbaceous, woody, try to get the whole picture. And so when something stops qualifying for veg structure, it now qualifies for coarse down wood. So we measured the trees, once they fall over, we measured the logs. You can kind of, in the fire is a good example of how one drops off, the other one picks up. I decided to also look at some of the species. And notice I don't have it past 2020, but you can still see this is a ridge plot that burned really hot. Before the fire, all this is just sapling species. We only had 2 species of saplings before the fire. Afterwards, species number way higher. And this is on the ridge. And the biggest ones were Pinus pubescens and pines. The pines exploded after the fire. That was 2020. They're very big now. We measured them recently. This is at the bottom of the mountain. And this plot has already a number of species in the sapling growth, but then afterwards, particular species did much better than others after the fire. And I think it's just interesting. I don't know if I don't have anything beyond this going, there's a lot of ash that exploded after the fire. I don't know what's gonna happen to them. And then ironwood and silverbell. But this is just brief look. I didn't have a chance to do the more updated one, but this year for the Smokies, we did our vegetation sampling in every single tower plot. And we have an entire data set of all 20. We do 5 every year, but we did all 20 this year. And so we have a lot of 8 years post-fire data right now. And the last time we did that was 2019. So you can look at it 3 years after and then 5 years after that. And if I had time, I would look at it, but I don't. It's not my job. All right, so at this point, I want to kind of demo. Am I doing good? With where to get started with all of this, because it's a little overwhelming. I'm going to go through a few of the website things and make sure. Okay, so our website is neonscience.org. feel free to grab a sticker with it on it to help you remember. And there's a lot of stuff on this website. So if you're interested in just sort of seeing where we are for field sites, we actually have an Explore Field Sites map that's interactive. So you can zoom into any of our sites and see exactly where our plots are. Do this one, yes, there it is. And see what kind of plots we have where and get all that information. So if you just want to see where we are, what we're doing, this is a good place to sort of zoom around. But the best place to get an overall view of what you could possibly use from NEON is the Getting Started with NEON Data and Resources page. And so this page, it's really a one-stop shop where you could go through it and it has links to all the pages sort of in a row. So you can just sort of scroll down and say, oh, this is what I'm interested in. Because we start with the data products and how you get NEON data, linked to the data portal. And then it goes into the tutorials and R and Python codes. And videos on how to do it. And data skills tutorials. So I mentioned the data skill workshops. We actually have recorded a couple of them and they are available here as well. But the data tutorials are really good. And it's not just NEON data. We have an intro to R code tutorial, just blanket, just normal, before it dives into how to use the NEON specific code packages. And there's a lot of data tutorials. I don't know how many, it's hard to find them, a particular one sometimes, because you can't just scroll through them. There's so many. And it's how to deal with different types of NEON data as well. But there's many more. And then there's our code hub. And then we have our teaching modules. So if you're interested in just seeing how to use NEON in education, we have cubes and then we have teaching modules, our science videos. This is our library if you're interested in just going to our protocols and seeing our methods and what we use for different things. And then at the bottom, this is our research support services. So this is how you can use the NEON infrastructure if you want to utilize the people and the permits that we have spread out all over the country. So it's a good place to start to figure out if any of this is useful. And now I can go, just use the link here to that'll go away in a second. The data portal. So if you go straight to the data portal website, I'm going to go to this Get Data. It has a lot of other things on it, but this particular page it's not hard to use, but there's a lot of information here that I want to just cover briefly. So we have 180 data products. So you can sort them on the side based on different categories, where they are, those three broad categories I kind of used, I sort of broken them a little bit more here. And then the domain or the theme. So those 5 types of data themes, you can just organize it by that and scroll around. I'm going to type in vegetation structure. Our filters really. Yeah. It's pretty sensitive, but there's a lot of things called that. Just type in structure. Yeah, vegetation structure. So for instance, to look at this data, you can look at just overall what we have. You can look at it by site, state, or domain. But I do want to tell you the difference between the diagonal ones and the solid ones. So we have our release data and we have our provisional data. The provisional data is data that is as most up to date as you can get it, but it's not complete for the entire data product or data set. No, data product. And so you can download the most recent data we have. For instance, the vegetation structure data that we were collecting in the Smokies this winter, I know the first half of it should be available in the portal now. But not the last half, because we collected more of it yesterday. That's not available yet. But the first part should be, but you would only get it in provisional data, you would not get it in the release. The release data is a set release of a complete set of all data products, and it's by year. And this is so if you use it in your research, you can refer back to a complete data set that does not change. So that's sort of the difference between provisional and release data. Depending on what analysis you want to do, you might want to use either one. Once you know what you want to look at, if you look at product details, this has some of the really information on what we're collecting. When you download it, it has information on the different, you collect through a data, it's broken up. Let me back up. So if you get our vegetation structured data, it's all split up into different Excel files if you do it from this website. If you do it remotely, you get a data frame with a lot of different sets of data sets. There we go. And so this tells you, once you download it, what it comes with. This one has a lot. Some of them don't have that many. So this explains what each one is, and then how to cite it. And then it goes into the description of what this is. And at the bottom, you actually get a link to the protocol and then a guide for how to use the data. So this is a great place to start to see if any of these data products actually are something that you can use. I recommend, if you get to the point of downloading the data and are comfortable with programming, it's a lot easier using a program than using this to download it, because it downloads everything by month and then you have to compile it. You can do that automatically with the coding, but you can use it here and it's fine. Back here. To just finish up before questions, I just want to sort of highlight, we can't do this alone. Neon is huge and we have a ton of people, but we still can't do everything. So we collaborate with a bunch of different partners to do various things, such as data hosting, education. We have network partners. One of the ones I use the most isn't even up here, but the National Phenology Network, all our phenology data is theirs, and our data is on their website as well, and all our methods are the same. And we've done workshops together with them. So they're a really good partner as well. And then these are all the people, all the partners who help us with sample analysis. Sorry about the top, I can't remember how to go. So these are all the people we depend on to help us analyze our samples, because we do a little bit of analyzation in the lab, but most of them we ship off and they do the more complicated things. So we're very thankful. Carnegie does all our expert beetle ID. Various ones do various things. I don't even know what they all do. And so with that, I just want to highlight we are on social media. Our Instagram account is pretty active and we can see what we're doing in the field. And this is our YouTube with all the information. And have any questions?
Do you know if you guys collect temperature data within trees by chance?
Don't do it within, we do soil temperature. I don't do any tree temperature.
Okay.
Yeah,
So are there international programs that are similar to this that NEON also sort of maybe collaborates with, isn't the right word, but can overlay with to get a broader geographical picture?
yes, we've been working with a few, there's one in Europe and one in Australia that I know we talked to a lot. I think we did initially to sort of model it for startup, but they're not directly comparable. But we are currently, I want them to send me, but I'm too down on the list, working with South Korea. They're working on a KEON, the Korea Ecological Observatory Network. And that one we're collaborating with heavily and they're getting it started. They started it last couple of years to set that up. So nothing exactly the same, but there's some very similar ones.
There's nothing in Canada or Mexico in particular that would be similar to that would just be across our borders, let's say.
Not that I've not been told. I did talk to a researcher, this is just a side note, but she was gonna model ours in a Costa Rica site, just using our protocols and our methods to have a comparable data set. But it wasn't like an official system. So it can be done, but it's not been done as a network.
Great, thank you.
A lot of information. Go ahead.
How do you select the sites? Do people contact NEON asking for all the sensors, or do you guys reach out to people or both?
So all the sites are, they don't move, they were set at the very beginning of the project. There were a lot more sites that they wanted to do, and these were the ones we ended up being able to do. So it was sort of a, where could we get permits? Kind of conversation. Some of the sites were very easy to work with. Our site in Virginia, half of it is at a biological station owned by University of Virginia. They're amazing to work with. The other half is in the National Forest. And then we have to work with the National Forest Service. They're a little slower on the permitting. So that was our last site to move forward. So I believe NEON reached out. The newer sites, we are not doing it on private land, but some of the early ones, we have at least 2 on actual private land and have collaborations with the landowners. But it's mainly where we could do it within those ecoregions. The original scope of NEON was even more massive, and they've scaled back a lot. So we were supposed to move sites every 10 years and then have so many more. Anyway, it was very complicated. Setting up one of those towers took too long. And they're like, we can't do this every 10 years.
Without knowing that much about what climate data you collect, what would be the difference between this set and like PRISM climate data, or like how would you characterize that difference? Are they different?
What is PRISM?
I think PRISM climate data, my understanding is it's like the long-term data set from Oregon State University that a lot of people use for research that's pretty like continent-wide, like EPT, temperature, annual maximums and stuff like that. And it just sounds, some of it sounded similar and I was curious what the trade-off is.
It probably is very similar. I I'm familiar with it a little bit, but I don't know the origin for it, but I can kind of describe it a little bit. Our climate, I know, let me back up a little bit more. We have a committee called STIAC. I'm not gonna remember what that stands for, but STIAC is a committee that basically is a bunch of scientists in ecology. They get together every year to make sure our data is relevant with the research that's going on. And so I know those conversations happened a lot at the beginning to make sure what we're collecting fits with that type of like, if that's the standard for collecting climate data, we want to match that. So I would assume that they have, I just don't know. But these are some of the sensors, so I can see if I can remember what they all are. I know this is light. I know they do temperature and wind. This is, this tracks the sun. And so it is a measure of, I don't know exactly what it does. I just know it tracks the sun movement and intensity. And it's gotta be very similar. I know we just joined the Purple Air Network at each of our sites. It's not on top of the tower, it's at ground level, well, it's not ground level. There. So we're doing that network as of this winter. So we're working on that kind of thing, but I have to ask some people to see if it's matching.
Thank you.
Now I'm interested. I'm gonna ask our tower people if they.
Okay. Let's thank Margaret again.
This is the view from our Smokies Tower.
We're working on it.